All right, this is Cody. I just got 11th place at Rosemont Regionals playing Gem Knights. Not exactly the result I wanted, but I had a pretty unfortunate round 2 loss that cost me tiebreakers for getting the top 8 that I was shooting for. Ended up going 7-2 overall. Matchups were 5 Canine Vanquish Soul, 1 Radiant Typhoon, 1 Draco Tail, 1 Fiendsmith Mitsurugi, and 1 Dark Lord Soulful Cord. The only matches I lost were against Radiant Typhoon and Draco Tail, and I think that came down to kind of a misapproach in how to play against those decks overall. I think I should be going first against them rather than choosing to go second against them. Overall, I think it's a lot easier to stop them from playing if we're able to start rather than trying to play through their board and kind of like God hand them, essentially, is the game plan that was in place prior, but now I think it's a little optimistic, especially with some of the side deck options that those decks have. But I'll talk more about that as I get into the deck profile. Wanted to give a few shout outs before anything. Shout outs to Anthony Shu, first and foremost. His list for the YCS and Nationals and all of that really was the big inspiration for this. I saw those and had a very big desire to actually try the deck out and see what it could do. Shouts to Thomas Newman as well. My boy got fourth, not playing this deck, but we spent like the week prior to the event just testing the absolute hell out of this list and really putting it through the ringer and deciding what the absolute best cards were. So a lot of his input was very, very good for us. Shouts to Omar. He drove us all the way there and all the way back, despite having to judge the event and everything else. Super huge MVP there, and really helped me through the whole day and gave me the support I needed. But without further ado, I wanted to start talking about the deck. So the Gem Knight engine is, of course, 3 Neperum, 3 Armadillo, 3 Quartz, 2 Hollow Core. We'll go over the spells as well. Dispersion, Brilliant Fusion, 1 Scatter Fusion, not 2, and Gem Knight Fusion, of course. So we'll go down the list one by one on this. Gem Knight Fusion, you just basically always have to play this because of Hollow Core's effect. It's the best thing to Foolish because of the recursive add back that it has, and this is kind of like representative of a 4th push that you can have with the deck. The other pushes being the continuous spells as well as Quartz to access the continuous spells. These are insane value, but the issue is these are very weak to the quick play spells that people are playing right now. They're very weak to Fallen and Virtuous. MST doesn't even need to mandate these. It can just pop these and kill them. Vanquish Soul is able to pop these as well with Caesar, which is a problem sometimes. And you have to kind of mitigate the risk of those if you're going to depend on Quartz for a push. So Quartz tends to be a weaker push, but you are able to utilize it in that sense. So the other push is going to be Dispersion's second effect, because Hollow Core is always setting Gem Knight Fusion for you. Dispersion is always another copy of your Scatter Fusion, Brilliant Fusion kind of situations. So being able to access this card super easily off of both Neperum and Phantom Quartz is invaluable to the deck. And knowing when to recognize, like, if you have Dispersion already, a lot of times your best add off of Neperum is actually Hollow Core, rather than even risking going for a Dispersion. There were a lot of times I opened Neperum plus Dispersion and recognized that I would lose to Droll, so adding Hollow Core allows you to play through Droll, and I got Drolled, I think, twice in that circumstance and was able to play through it because of the fact that Hollow Core plus Dispersion is such a strong combo piece. And that is like your other push is the ability to go comboing Hollow Core and Dispersion naturally throughout your combo. And then the final push is just your other Gem Knight cards. So Armadillo searching you Hollow Core gets you access to Phantom Quartz, which then, of course, gets you access to the Dispersion as well. But then Phantom Quartz is a fusion on the field that you can use. Otherwise, Neperum and Armadillo both kind of do similar things. Neperum gives you access to Dispersion, which gives you access to Armadillo, which gives you access to Hollow Core. Is the very rudimentary way that this engine kind of breaks down, but there are a lot of permutations that you can take along with it. Neperum also has a lot of utility in being able to extra normal summon either Armadillo or Gem Knight Quartz as well, because this makes it rank 4. And there was lot of instances where the rank 4 was super relevant for my play lines. But that is the entire engine. I think it's a 17 card engine, so it's really tight, really compact. There's not really much else to say. I did want to touch on dropping Scatter Fusion to 1. I see this at 2 in a lot of lists still. This was a factor of Anthony Chu's list as well. This is a really good card, honestly. It plays under Caesar because the card itself isn't performing the fusion summon. It's the effect of the card. And Caesar's not able to negate spell effects. Same thing with Retaliating Sea, actually. Retaliating Sea can't trigger on Scatter Fusion. So post-side, especially, you want to utilize Quartz to set Scatter Fusion rather than Brilliant Fusion. Even though Brilliant Fusion has like slightly better applications overall, Scatter Fusion is just the safer play line. But going back to cutting Scatter Fusion to 1, the issue with this card is it's, again, really weak to all of the meta trends that are happening right now, like MST being in lists that aren't Radiant Typhoon as well. Like there's Mitsurugi lists running around with, you know, a Visions package to deep draw in the draw phase so that they can find their Mitsurugi pieces more easily. And they'll oftentimes include a copy or two of MST in that engine just to help play through boards as well. So that, along with Fallen and the Virtuous being in like virtually every deck now, is really bad for this card. And the times where I was seeing this card plus Quartz were too many, basically, that I didn't want to continue to include it when redundancies like that can exist. And that's a big philosophy with my deck building for the deck in general, is to minimize redundancy as much as possible. So like you can play 3 of all of the Gem Knight cards because they are, you know, fusion material, and also like you can multiple normal summon your Armadillos, which is getting you extra value for your continued fusion summons as well. Nepram as well is like a body that you can extra normal off of a Nepram, so opening like double Nepram isn't always bad because you do have this as a play line if they decide to Ash the Nepram or something like that. And otherwise, yeah, Dispersion having the 2 effects per turn as well means that opening multiple Dispersion isn't particularly bad, and it gives your other searchers something else to do. Like when you have like Nepram plus double Dispersion, then you're able to, you know, add Quartz, add Hollow Core, add a Gem Armadillo, and still have another add off of Phantom Quartz in the end of it all. So you're able to do a lot with the cards, even if you see multiples of them. So the only thing would be like Scatter Fusion being hard once and being redundant with Gem Knight Quartz in some sense is sometimes a problem. So I wanted to avoid that as much as I could. Going into non-engine, we're going to see that trend continue as well. The only hand traps I'm playing 3 of are Fua and Perulia. I didn't want to run any more than 2 copies of most of the other non-engine cards in the list. And these are exempt from that rule because you're able to use 2 per turn, so seeing 2 of them is fine. Granted, seeing 3 Charmies in 1 turn cycle is sometimes bad, but you are able to sometimes just fire off another Charmy in your own turn and start playing, and then your opponent's punished for playing on your turn, which is a very big theme of the current metagame as well. So obviously, I don't have to defend Charmies too much. These were absolutely phenomenal at putting people in half boards. Half boards are far, far easier for this deck to play through, and yeah, Charmies did their job very well. Similarly, these cards chase out Ash Blossom from hands. All of your cards do not like to be Ash Blossomed, so being able to just like force your opponent to use an Ash Blossom early is very helpful. So I did play 2 Bell main deck. That was very, very positive overall. Even into like Canine Vanquishal, where you don't think this card is particularly good, it had a lot of application. I think my first match of the day, I opened something like this plus Neparum. Or no, I think I drew into these off of the Perulia and I had the Ghost Spell. So I was able to Imperm the Vanquish Soul combo, Ash the Azuna, or Ash the Push they had afterwards, which I think they had Field Spell as well. So they went like normal raise and activate Field Spell. So Imperm Ash, and then they went Azuna, dump Lupus to Reborn, and then I Ghost Spelled that. So they're just dealing with Raisin plus Azuna with like 2 cards left in their hand. And from there, like, your Neparim's just going to resolve and go through everything. So that was very positive for Bell overall. I was also very scared of the Diabellstar engine, because I saw a lot of that in my testing, but I didn't end up seeing it at all the day of. But Bell would have been very good against that. It stops activations, so this stops Wanted from activating, which means that even if they get to Witch later on in the combo, they don't have a spell activation to necessarily push through more interaction, and they would have to spend another card to get to that point anyway, and then the Deception is far less likely to do anything meaningful from that point. You're kind of just limiting their resources in that sense. Otherwise, this was very good into just like random matchups. Like this was overperforming crazy against Dark Lord because their fusion spell is like all that the deck does, it feels like, and Bell stops it. Was really happy with Bell, two Bell in the main, really happy with 2 Ash in the main as well. I didn't want to basically ever be in a situation where I saw multiple of the same hand traps. So I wanted to mitigate that problem as much as possible while still maximizing my ability to play through a Draco Tail board, because Ash and Bell both apply to the trap cards equally. So having either of them is totally fine, and having 2 distinct ones is actually really nice, because then you're able to pin 2 trap cards rather than just 1, and Sting is a problem for the deck because it can hit the Gemnite Fusion out of your graveyard and turn off a lot of recursion and flexibility in your playlines. So that was that. And then 3 Imperm as the final hand trap, just super ubiquitous, always applicable. I wanted to respect Canine Vanquish Soul somehow in the main deck, and Imperm was the best way to do that, in my opinion. And it performed extremely well against the deck all day long. Anytime I saw this, I felt pretty confident I was going to win the game. And then we'll come back to these, but these are like ways to help you play, which kind of go along with Ash Bell. The breakers that we were playing were 3 Droplet, 2 Fallen and Virtuous, 2 for the same reason as the 2 Ash and the 2 Bell. Seeing 2 of this in your hand going second is extremely bad. Like, it is not good to just like have a Droplet send or have a free discard fodder. That doesn't really matter to your combo line as much as just having live cards as much as possible. You want to draw 6 cards that do something. And if you're not drawing 6 cards that do something, something's wrong. The only exception, and I'm still considering cutting this back to 2 as well, was Droplet, and that's just for the fact that if you see 2 Droplet, you have an extra free Droplet send. So you get to answer one more thing on the board. But that's kind of a weaker rationale overall for Droplet, so it could be something like a Lightning Storm instead, and we could kick this to the side deck so that we have just, one more unique card that we could play. So that would maybe be one shift I would make moving forward. But then we've got 4 cards that just help us play. Talon, Salesband, Thrust. Salesband was amazing. Oftentimes, people will expect this to be like a first action kind of card, but there are a lot of board states where you don't exactly know how your opponent is going to use their interactions until you start playing into their board. And then once you've confirmed that they're going to use a card a certain way, then you can sales ban it if it's going to stop you from getting to the OTK setup. Otherwise, if they like misuse their resources especially, then you can start using sales ban as a way to check unknowns. So if like they have a card in their hand that you don't know about, and you want to respect, the possibility of a Nibiru or a Sheena or like a Clutch Dizuna, something like that, then you can use Salesman in that sense and then force them to use it at that moment before it's like an actual problem for you later on. Otherwise, Talent gives you a way of like, with multi-monster boards like Canine Vanquish Soul especially, you can force out one of their interactions from their monsters and then steal the other monster and force them to do other things in that way. Or you could like take the only Vanquish Soul name so that you can turn off like Caesar tag out, turn off Borger tag out, turn off like a Holy Sue potentially is another option. And just forcing them to not have the resources when they need the resources. And then Thrust just gives you access to these 2 cards. It gives you access to Duster. And it's a big reason I'm thinking maybe 1 Lightning Storm main deck is actually probably the way to go moving forward as well. Just because you have this additional flex spot copy that you can use in those scenarios. And then Called By. Ash and Bell are big problems for this deck. Droll is somewhat of a problem for this deck. You don't really care about Charmies as much, and initially I cut the card completely because I was just like, okay, you don't really need to respect Ash or Bell that hard, but you really kind of do need to respect these cards because Like last card Ash, last card Bell to stop your OTK line is just really rough. And would be something I would rather not have to deal with. So having a called by just to have insurance, 10, 12% of the time is a good enough rationale in general. And all of those cuts, the cutting Scatter Fusion, cutting Ash and Bell to 2, and cutting Fallen and Virtuous to 2 was all in service of keeping the deck at 40 cards. You want to draw as many good cards as possible, and you want to maximize your chance of seeing the cards you want to see. Like your big power one-ofs, like Duster especially, is something that you want to see a lot, and I did see quite a bit overall in the event. Yeah, besides the droplet change that I floated, I probably wouldn't change anything else about the main deck. It was absolutely phenomenal. Going into extra deck now, we've got just the typical Fusion lineup. I don't think any of this is particularly necessary to explain. These cards are all phenomenal. The Power Rangers that you summon off of your Diamond Dispersion. This card is custom, absurd, absolutely broken card. Lady Rose Diamond is also just a crazy card into the Canine Vanquish Soul. I had so many people try and do tag outs with this card face up, and they just kind of eat interruption in that sense. And especially, like, this is a great way to keep Caesar off of the board, so long as you're able to answer Field Spell in some way as well. So oftentimes you can make this and then, like, force the Ripper to do something, pop the Field Spell, and then once they start trying to tag out their guys, you can pop them that way as well. Otherwise, Seraphonite, I almost cut Seraphonite because it didn't seem strictly necessary, but there are a lot of combo lines where you really do actually need Seraphonite quite a bit. And it helps your turn 1 boards quite a bit as well to have Seraphonite to cycle cards in the event that you get surprise sent first. Didn't happen any at the regional for me. Nobody actually chose to send me first, but it was something I wanted to hedge against just in case as well, because it does happen fairly often in testing where people are a little more familiar with the deck overall. Otherwise, these are your two like big playmakers. They're huge, like usually 3,400 plus bodies that just punch through everything, especially with Topaz and Ruby FX being copied onto Master Diamond. You're able to do quite a lot with these cards. Then we will cover Phantom Quartz. This card is also super, super custom. Like, this card is everything a Link 2 could ever be, really. It gives you a free add-on summon. It gives you extra recursion because it shuffles back its materials. It gives you another push just for making 2 bodies. This is, like, extremely powerful as a card and really is the big choke point for the deck a lot of the time, but it's so easy to just go into another one as well. This probably could end up being something you go to 3 of into like Blazing Dominion format so that you can play better into like Killer Tune stuff overall. This card is very, very, very important to the deck. And then our technical pieces. We'll talk about Ecclesia very briefly, just because the logic here is really quick to go over. You need something to send off of Fallen and Virtuous, and you have a few different options. You have, obviously, this card, which we're playing. We have Abelonatus, which, if you expect your Dracotail players to end on a Fallen of Albaz, or if you expect to be able to interrupt the Fallen of Albaz fuse and then punish them afterwards for going for the line, that you could go for Abelonatus. And Abelonatus does also, coincidentally, search you Gem Knight Fusion, which sometimes matters, but I felt that Ecclesia was a little better in that sense, and similar to Albion, like, the thing Albion is doing for you would be just getting you a dead Fallen in the Virtuous, which doesn't really make any sense at all in any circumstance. I don't think you ever need that extra card in any scenario whatsoever. So we went with Ecclesia the Dark Dragon, specifically because we do have a level 8 fusion monster that we're able to shuffle back. So in situations where you're going first and you open Fallen of the Virtuous, you are able to send the Ecclesia off, make the Lady Rose Diamond, and in the event they break your board and you have to start pushing through their board that they build afterwards, you have this free shuffle back in the end to kind of get the extra value out of the Fallen and Virtuous that Albion would normally be giving decks. So that is the theory for the choice. It didn't ever come up because, obviously, like I said, nobody sent me first all of the 9 rounds for whatever reason. But this definitely could come up and you would like it to be Ecclesia when it does. We'll go over the links. SP and Herald of Mirage Light. This was my big innovation overall, is your board going first could end up being usually something like this. You're able to set this up off of one Armadillo or one Neperum. Dispersion, you need another card in hand to get the full effect of it, but then you're able to Master Diamond to tag out into your other guys, which are usually these three, and I like leaving Ruby in the deck just so you don't have to shuffle it back to summon it with Master Dispersion later on. But with this setup, it's very, very hard to deal with all of these bodies without going to battle phase for at least some of them. And if they leave these bodies and attack the Link monsters instead, then you have a free Phantom Quartz with a bounce later on. And otherwise, like if one of these dies by battle, the Master Diamond can come back as well and stick on the board and then have the tag out live on your own turn again. So that you don't even have to necessarily Phantom Quartz for anything. You just have the Master Diamond already. But again, with this being the general idea we're going for on setup, Mirage Light is very nice here because it is a spell or trap negation on top of your Holocore negate. So you have, two spell trap negates, which, we could map that onto, Rahu Ketu. We could map that onto, Chant plus, what is the other spell? Like Chant plus Visions. You also have these two to deal with those. You have an SP to deal with monster effects. Or alternatively, if it's a more monster heavy deck and you just need to negate an activation of a Vanquish Soul Start, you could do that with Mirage Light and still have Holocore to pin a monster effect as well. But the big thing that I really liked about this setup is you're able to put a Neperum in your hand during your combo lines. And once you Mirage Light, you have to discard a fairy to activate that effect. And on resolution, Neperum is able to reborn because its activation condition was fulfilled by the Herald of Mirage Lights. So this is also just netting you follow-up for free, which is really solid. So the discard doesn't even cost you anything, especially in the context of always having a Gem Knight Fusion to add back in your graveyard after your combo is through for the free discard off of Neperum. And this is a much easier board to make, and it is way more likely to get most of the pieces. Like maybe you miss out on SP, but you can still end on this through one disruption. Perfectly fine. And that was my big issue with the Christia line that Anthony Shu was talking about in his YCS profiles. That combo is very, very fragile to interruption. Basically, any form of interruption will stop the combo at some point. And it also takes way more Mulch Armies to get there, which is a problem that I wanted to avoid for sure. It also doesn't do much of anything into Retaliating Sea. It doesn't do anything into Shifter either. But like you won't obviously get to this board through a Shifter either. But you can get there through a Retaliating Sea in a lot of circumstances as well. And the other kind of neat thing is the SP can actually kind of soft protect you through like a Nibiru. So you can also chase out a Nibiru out of their hand in some instances and then preserve a fusion body to have your Holocore live without having to negate the Nibiru. So that's also a really nice reason to end on SP rather than ending on IP. But the other reason to cut the IP was just to consolidate your extra deck space as much as possible, because I did want to make room for the last two cards in our extra deck, Tornado Dragon and Dugaris. Dugaris I wanted to play because there are some times where you have an extra material on your field and you just want to draw cards. Like you're looking at your hand that was super engine heavy and you don't have enough like hand traps to comfortably deal with like a Radiant Typhoon push or a Canine Vanquish Soul push or, whatever. Then you can Dugaris draw 2, discard 1. If you haven't activated your Neperum yet, you can summon back that Neperum. But also, if you're in a circumstance where you had to Holocore negate something, and you are able to put a second hollow core in your hand, which does sometimes happen as well, then you're able to put that hollow core in your graveyard and have the negate live for your opponent's turn as well. So Dugaris going first fixes a lot of issues, but also going second, this also fixes some issues that you can potentially run into because of some side deck options we're playing. But there were times where, like, if you get interrupted really heavily, you just don't have good options for OTK lines because, you know, people summon in defense mode after seeing that you are just an OTK deck, so they're trying to shield themselves from both Lightning Storm and shield themselves from, you know, battle damage. You can instead have Master Diamond copy Ruby effect, and then it'll gain a bunch of attack. You can usually put it to, like, you know, 7,000 or so. And then if you do Dugaris that Master Diamond up to 15,000, it doesn't really matter what defense position monster you're attacking, you're going to kill them. Similarly, I'll talk directly about it now. We are playing Forbidden Crown in our list. And this card was absolutely phenomenal all day, but it does have that issue of the monster doesn't die. So you don't get the burn off of a Topaz effect, and Dugaris fixes that issue as well, where if you set up Master Diamond plus Dugaris and you double your Master Diamond's attack, you can attack into basically anything 2 times and have it kill them. So this was also kind of a way for me to make this card a little bit nicer to play in the list overall. And it didn't come up at all at the regional, but it did come up in testing a few times, so I wanted to make sure that Dugaris was in my list, so I had to sacrifice IP for that sense. Coincidentally, talking about IP, Dugaris can sometimes also transform 2 level 4s into a SP as well. So, like, if you go through your normal, like, Neprum Armadillo line, overlay for Dugaris, and, you know, detach, and say you Charmied them, or you Ashed them, or whatever, you can reborn that Charmy, and then that's your SP material right there. So that's another reason to play Dugaris in my mind. But the big one I wanted to talk about, and the one I think is the most important, is Tornado Dragon. This card was absolutely amazing. All of the, like, problematic interruptions in the format are back row. You have very free access to this card. Like, one Neprum does it every time. Armadillo does it most times after making a Phantom Quartz. And you are able to just sometimes stick this on the board against, like, Radiant Typhoon, and their mandate is just pinned down until they deal with the Tornado Dragon directly. And oftentimes that means they have to MST something of their own and then chain the mandate to the Tornado Dragon, and then the Tornado Dragon is just going to pop the mandate anyway. And that's really nice. I really, really enjoyed having that circumstance as well. Alternatively, this is revealing where their MSTs are, and if you need your quartz to go through, for example, you can pop where you know their other MST is, or where you can infer their other MST is, as it may. This also deals with just, like, mystery back row. This is your way to deal with K9 Vanquish Soul start a lot of the time. Like, this hits the field spell, this hits the trap card. If they're playing the trap card, it can force that early on, and then you can still play past the trap card without having any issues from there if your hand happens to lose to that. I've sniped super polys with this, I've sniped droplets with this, I've forced out imperms, all the rest. Like, people will hold some very funny cards. I had this get crowned as well once, just because I targeted a crown that someone had set, and they wanted to get value off the crown and stick me with a Tornado Dragon I couldn't use. And that's fair. But this card just really good into the format. Like, very, very, very well positioned overall. That concludes the extra deck. So now we'll talk about our side deck, because the side deck was very, very difficult to decide on, and Forbidden Crown was actually a last-minute addition. In all of my testing, I was doing Fenrir for a going first option that dealt with Retaliating Sea, as well as dealing with Dimensional Fissure, in theory. But realistically, the decks playing Di-Fi can protect the Di-Fi from Fenrir very reliably, so it wasn't a very clean answer to Di-Fi, and I would rather have just gone for the Tornado Dragon against Di-Fi. Even though the MST situation does happen, it at least gives you a way to force out an MST, whereas Fenrir doesn't really do that as well, because they're able to oftentimes just use, like, you know, a droplet or a crown or Fallen the Virtuous on Fenrir and just invalidate the card in general anyway. These are much harder to deal with overall. Something I might consider is Pankratops. I saw some lists with it and didn't really understand it, but with Di-Fi being in the format and being such a problem for this deck, Pankratops actually makes a lot of sense and is very well positioned into Di-Fi's use cases, which is like, Canine Vanquish Soul and Radiant Typhoon specifically. They can't really stop a Pankratops from dealing with Di-Fi. But Crown was very, very good. I had some instances where like board states were very gummy and I had multiple things that I wanted to stop at one time. Like I had a Caesar on field and an unknown in my opponent's hand that ended up being a Nibiru. And I had damage on board, but it was only lethal on board if I crowned their Rock of the Vanquisher, which they allowed me to go to battle phase because they didn't foresee Forbidden Crown being the way that they died, essentially. I was able to crown their rock, which negates its effects and makes it indestructible. So then you're able to crash, your big 3,000 attack fusion monsters into the rock 3 times, and then they die. Like, that's all I ended up doing was hitting with Master Diamond, hitting with Lady Brilliant, and hitting with Ruby. And that's well over OTK into a 0 attack monster. So that's one use case. This can stop the entire like Canine setup turn 1 because this doesn't target and it makes it that you can't use it as Xyz material either, so they can't forced release if you use this in standby or draw phase. So that's another really powerful use of this card. This is also a really good card going first because it does check Retaliating Sea. It does also form a very powerful interruption where if they start like, normal summon Raisin and you chain Forbidden Crown to this, they probably just don't get to do any Vanquishal stuff from there because their Raisin is negated. They can't make rocks, so they can't get attributes back in hand. So they have to open a very specific set of cards for them to be able to play through like a Crown on a Raisin. Similar thing with Yummy. Like if you just crown their normal summon, it's very hard to get that normal summon off of the board. And yeah, I was very happy with Crown overall. A lot of times I was just siding 2 in, but there were a couple times, mostly against Canine Vanquish Soul, where I just really wanted to see this card, so I sided the 3 in, despite the issues with deck building that I talked about earlier, where you want all your cards to be live all the time. It was mostly situations where I wasn't sure if they were going to send me first or second, so I wanted to make sure that in my 5-card hand I would see a Crown. And it ended up being quite good. I was happy with the change overall. Chalice. This is another card that I think is like actually super underrated in the format. This card is highly flexible. There are instances for this card to be relevant in pretty much every matchup. This is really, really clutch into Yummy, especially being able to just turn off a Yummy Snatchy on the field entirely is very, very good. It can also force a pretty big neg on like surprise plays where you take all of their synchro material off the board entirely, and then you have a much easier time OTKing through their board at that point. This can stop, a Murakumo from wiping your field. This can stop, Arthalion bounces or like Chaos Star Source Dragon for popping your back row, which is something Dracotail does quite a bit for you. If you're sent first or you choose to go first, this is additional copies of Imperm that your opponent isn't able to like, cross out for or anything like that. So I was very happy with Chalice overall as well. I really liked this card in testing. It didn't come up much at the regional, but I had a lot of good moments with Chalice in my testing overall. Then 2 Lightning Storm. I talked about this earlier. I do kind of want to main one of these inside the Droplet instead. I have a lot of ways to force this through already in the main deck, and having just like that one extra little option for, flexibility, and especially game 1s, people aren't going to play around this card. They aren't going to, summon correctly. Otherwise, Lightning Storm's Lightning Storm is essentially extra copies of Duster in most cases. You're not really using the monster side of the effect very often, but it can sometimes be relevant. Going into the monsters, we have the 3rd copies of Ash and Bell for going first, for going into Dracotail, going into Radiant Typhoon, where you just want to 1-for-1 hand trap the decks and stop them from playing at all. Very good cards, obviously. Lancia wanted to respect Malice. This gives you a couple more options against like Luna Light, gives you maybe some play into the Tri-Brigade Yummy deck that was running around. I don't really have a lot of good experience against that deck, so I don't know if Lancia would make the cut of your side patterns, but it's an option. This is also pretty good into Branded, because you can kind of encourage them to go for the Ecclesia line, and then the Lancia stops the Ecclesia without taking away like your Ash for turn, your Bell for turn, things like that. So it becomes a lot more difficult for your opponent to set up a realistic board when you Lancia them. And then 2 draw, because there are FTKs in the format, and you don't want to lose to FTKs. Yeah, I have yammered on quite long enough. Obviously, I'm not as content with my result as I probably should be. Like 11th place with a deck like this is very, very good overall. The deck is extremely skill intensive. It takes a lot of awareness of format trends, meta trends, what decks do, all of the rest, and you have to be thinking on your feet basically every action and contemplating like how you lose in any given state of the board. So I was initially very frustrated going into the regional with this deck, and I said I was going to drop it for the foreseeable future after finishing the regional. I don't really feel that way anymore. This deck is extremely fun. It is so satisfying, and I think it might just be something I play for the foreseeable future. But thank you for listening to me yammer on for so very long. Hope you enjoyed and learned something. Until next time.